Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of eXhuming the X-Files here on the Outpost Unknown YouTube channel. My name is Special Agent Matthew. Joining me today, once again, Special Agent Jeremy.
Hey, everybody.
Now, we really loved Pilot. We were very excited coming off that. Now we're rolling into the first proper episode of the X-Files. This is the one that has a lot of money put towards it. We're gonna see that this is the one that has the actual intro, the famous intro opening credit sequence with the music by Mark Snow in it. That became just you hear that music and you're like, we're into this. This Deep Throat, directed by Daniel Sackheim, also written by Chris Carter. This first aired September 17th, 1993. 1 week later, takes place in Idaho, in a town near the fictional Ellens Air Force Base. All right, Jeremy, tell us a little bit about Deep Throat. What is this episode all about?
It's about investigating a soldier, a very decorated airman who had gone crazy and had been covered in this nasty rash. And then
Yeah.
finding out through that a bunch of other test pilots at this particular Air Force base have undergone the same psychosis, the same uh, medical maladies, and while the government seems to take care of their spouses and just kind of let these crazies live out their days, the idea is that maybe they're testing the sort of equipment that isn't abnormal.
Yeah, for sure. And it's like, again, we're rolling right into another alien episode, right? UFOs, aliens. So interesting that they didn't initially go to something, they didn't pivot. They're going full bore right into like, hey, look, pilot we established, we're looking at aliens. The very first episode here, right after the pilot, we are still going into aliens. And Mulder is I guess this is where we really get the conspiracy stuff, right? Would you say that this is the first episode? They're like, okay, they're going full tilt into the conspiracy angle, the government, the military, all of that.
They wanted to, they really wanted to spell it out to the audience. Well, that there is always this thing that looms over Mulder's X Files to set that tone about denying him the truth, feeding him little scraps of things here and there, and let him go out and investigate all this crazy shit. But when he doesn't, or he constantly comes up empty-handed because the truth is just snatched away at the last minute. So they needed to
Yeah.
establish that theme throughout this show, and they did a great job of it in this episode.
Yeah, for sure. And one thing I will say about this episode, and similar to Pilot, obviously these episodes all have a little prologue before it gets to the opening credit sequences. And any television show, especially it was on network television back in the day, you have your hour long thing. They would always have little prologues, and the prologues are kind of like, this is what we're going to get you to stay watching, right? So if you have a really shitty opening prologue of a show, like I'm talking about the first 2 or 3 minutes before the opening credits roll, you might click away. You might not stay on there for the Nielsen ratings to be able to capture. Oh yeah, you're one of the 5 million people that watch this episode. What thing I loved about the X Files is they almost always had killer intro prologues, and this one kind of opens with like, I don't know if it's the FBI or who it is, but there's all these like dudes with guns and whatever those huge uh, post things are that they use to smash down doors. They go in there and you see that dude like in his underwear, like shaking, and he's covered in this weird rash. And they're like, "What the hell is going on?" That's like the thing that gets you. Right, immediately you're like, okay, I gotta see what's going on here.
The hook.
It's the hook, and then boom, you go right into that opening credit sequence. And I don't want to sort of like over sort of state, or that's the wrong word I'm looking for, kind of like underemphasize kind of like the power of this opening credit sequence. When you were a kid and you saw the opening credit sequence of the X Files with the music, like what was your reaction?
there there's only other one other show that would get you like that, and you remember the tones for it from Unsolved Mysteries with Robert
Yes.
Stack. There's just something about, like, okay, you're sitting down, you're listening to the opening intro music, and it's just like sending shivers through your spine. It's getting you fucking weirded out, scared a little bit, but it gets you
Yeah.
into that mode of just, all right, this is what I'm doing right now. Very, few shows had that ability to do that.
Yeah, I love that analogy to Unsolved Mysteries because that was one of those things where even to this day I hear that and then Robert Stack's voice and you're like, "Oh my god, I'm getting goosebumps right now just thinking about it." It's
Right?
one of those things. And the X-Files is the same way. Like I had never as a kid seen an opening credit sequence like that. It was so weird and otherworldly, and you got that huge logo, like the X is humongous, like the X Files, and you're seeing like bits and pieces of subsequent episodes that haven't aired yet, and you're like, "What is that? What are they doing here?" Like, what I mean, like, get to see monsters later on, like, just weird stuff, and of course, it ends with, like, "The truth is out there," that famous phrase. I think personally it's one of the greatest, like, opening credit title theme sequences in television history for me, and the music by Mark Snow, once you hear it once and you never forget it.
Oh
It was
yeah.
like the perfect theme.
My 11-year-old is now sitting downstairs watching it with us when we sit down and watch it, and she had heard that theme for the first time, and she's like, "Oh my god, that's where that came from." And she's like, "Yeah, there's all sorts of weirdo memes that are just showing you like mysteries on the internet, and it's always to that particular theme and
Yeah, yeah, and
timeless."
it's definitely timeless, and it's weird to think about, like, people of this generation who are just growing up. I don't think it's hard to understand how culturally impactful this show was. I would argue that this show kind of drove the phenomenon of aliens and stuff. Though obviously, today's day and age, you get a lot of stuff about UFOs, and there's a lot of news out there, but it's not hitting culturally like it did in the early to mid 90s when it was just everywhere. Roswell was a huge thing. Books were coming out left and right. I still remember I go to like Barnes and Noble, not Barnes and Noble, read all about it in the Conestoga Mall in Grand Island, Nebraska. I'd go in there and you go to like the paranormal section of there and just pull out books, like Project Blue Book and like all of these various things, and like take them back. And I just read through them like crazy. You had Weekly World News. You go to the grocery store and you'd be checking out, and Weekly World News would.
Aliens chopped
Yeah,
off my face.
exactly. It was everywhere. Like it was pop culture everywhere. People were going crazy for this, and this show just fed into it and just kept that thing going and churning with great stories. And I think this one is a really cool story. I like the idea because right at the jump, Scully's like, "We were going to Idaho," because doesn't Blevins, who's like the FBI director, he's like Mulder's trying to get a requisition to go to Idaho or something like that, and like Scully's like, "Why are we going to Idaho?" And Mulder has to put all the pieces together for her. So they go out there. But I love the idea that there are these, like the military or the government, whoever it is, like they're screwing with these test pilots, and it's like these are like the best of the best people, right? These guys doing amazing things with these crazy aircraft, and like the government screwing with them. Like, why would our own government screw with our own military members and our decorated people? And that might hit you a little differently because obviously you were in the military, so maybe you have a better angle on that. But to me, like I look at, it, I'm just like, it feels weird that the government would screw with our own people like that, but they do all the time, right?
Right, no, you watch, like, old bomb or atom bomb test footage where they were just sticking dudes out there, to watch a mushroom cloud go up, and
Yeah,
they just hand them sunglasses and like, "Alright, you signed
yeah,
up for this, so
yeah,
good luck, soldier."
yeah. I love one of the early scenes in this that I really love is the introduction of Deep Throat. Deep Throat becomes a very important character for Mulder going forward. Tell the people a little bit about Deep Throat. Who is he?
Deep Throat seems to be an informant that wants to lead Mulder to the truth and just feeds him little breadcrumbs and like, hey, maybe you should be looking here instead of over here. But what you end up finding out fairly early on is that he's just another measure of control. It's just as long as Spooky is looking in this direction, he's not looking in this direction. As long as we're constantly in control of these wild goose chases he's on, that he won't ever really reach the heart of the truth
Yeah.
because we control it, the narrative.
Yeah, he definitely comes across as a super nice guy who just wants to help in this initial scene. Actually, just like pops up behind Mulder in the bathroom, very,
Yeah.
very creepily.
Hey,
He's
dude.
like, "Hey, what's going on?" But what I love about this is he specifically tells Mulder, "Don't go looking. Leave this one alone, buddy. Like, I can give you information about things, but don't do anything about this." And he does that. I should have wrote the line down. He does this really sort of cryptic line. I don't remember if it's at the beginning of the episode or at the end, where he's like, "Look, you got bigger things you can do, and if you start getting involved in this particular case, you're going to jeopardize everything that you're looking for. So don't do it." But of course, Mulder does it because that's Mulder, right? That's why we love him. He's like, "I can't not look into this, right? They're aliens, aliens, aliens." So they head to Idaho, and I love the fact that just the little scenes like in the diner. Where Mulder, like, it's literally called the flying saucer. I love that stuff because I love sort of that Hollywood Boulevard, for example, is my favorite place on earth. I love walking up and down Hollywood Boulevard and seeing all that sort of kitsch. The Ripley's
Yeah.
Believe It or Not Museum and the wax museums and stuff like that. I love going to like little places that are weird like this. Like, oh, the flying saucer. This is a place that if you and I were driving somewhere, we would stop, right?
Oh
If we
yeah,
saw the
yeah.
flying saucer, we would stop there.
For some reason, we found ourselves near Roswell. We're going down to the little alien. Like,
Yes, for sure, for sure. So I love that little touch, but there's this great moment in that diner where you see Mulder actually like he's doing actual detective. Oh, he's not a detective, but he's like doing investigating work, right? So he starts kind of flirting with the waitress a little bit. He's looking at all these photos of from UFOs that have been taken because this Air Force base, you know. Strange objects are all around the sky at this Air Force base, and I love that he's asking this lady because she's like, "Oh yeah, I took that one on the end," and she's like, "There's only 5 left," and he goes, "Well, how much is it?" She's like, $20, and like he buys it, and Scully's like, "Sucker," and she like rolls her eyes and leaves. And I love when he gets out there how they sort of set that up where Scully's got the map and she's trying to figure out what this Air Force base is, and then Mulder's like, "I got the local map. I know how to get there, sucker." I love that. What'd you think of that scene in particular?
I it was the first time that Gillian Anderson's character came across as funny, I think.
Yeah.
When he bought that picture, like I was kind of on her side because like you're just one of the fucking rubes just buying this
Yeah.
bullshit. What's funny is that picture comes up later and it doesn't really have any more energy or truth to it than it did when he bought it in the first place. He's just like,
Yes.
see what it's like. You're clearly maybe just staring at bullshit.
Yeah, and I love it's one of those things again where I identify with Mulder because that's something I would probably do if I was in the flying saucer and some waitress is like, "Yeah, I took that picture of the flying saucer." I would probably buy it just for the memory of buying it. Yeah, I bought this crazy,
Have her sign it, fucking put it in a frame, hang it on the
exactly.
wall.
Yeah, and so I'm just like, man, Mulder is just the coolest fucking guy. Like he's just so cool. I mean, he looks cool, he acts cool, he's smart, he's intelligent. He believes all
Having to
these things that I
respond
do.
to him.
Yeah, it's just like he was the guy. Super super cool. So yeah, then they sort of get there and they obviously they interview Colonel Budahas, right? Colonel Budahas's wife, and if I remember correctly, he's missing, and that's the main reason they go there first because the military won't say anything about why he's missing. So she calls the FBI. They go to this lady's house, whose husband also was missing and came back though. What was your reaction when they when they introduced this guy and his fly fishing lure creation skills?
Oh, when he was yanking hairs out of his head?
Yes.
Yeesh. Like, good on him for finding something to do with the tremendous amount of time that it was on his head, but he had like all of these little patchy spots in his
Yeah.
head that was just missing hairs. Like, this guy's been at this crazy shit
It was creepy. It's unsettling, and I think, it was a very simple thing they could do to make it very unsettling, but I even remember when I was younger and I saw that, I was like, oh, it has a creepiness to it without being sort of, like, over the top. They're not hitting you in the face with, "Oh, man, he's really screwed up." It's just a simple thing of yanking your hair out till it's gone to make these, like, fly fishing lures, and it's bizarre. But eventually, Mulder and Scully continue their investigation, trying to figure out what happened to Colonel Budahas, and they run into a couple stoner teenagers, played by one very famous actor. Do you know who the actor was?
Seth Green.
Seth Green. I think this is one of his first roles that he ever received too. Um, he's funny in this. Like
He is.
I generally don't sort of like stoner comedy, but I think he plays it. He plays that fine line where he's just funny enough that he's not over the top with it.
Yeah, it definitely wasn't a Cheech and Chong moment,
Yeah.
but
Yeah, and it's basically like Mulder and Scully find them because they're looking because Mulder's looking at these lights in the sky, and there's a moment when like Scully's in this car sleeping, and she wakes up because the windshield breaks or something because of the sonic boom or something, and they see them down there, and eventually they kind of lead Mulder into the airbase where he gets sort of picked up. Now, what I think is interesting about this, there's a whole sort of side plot here of what happens to these test pilots when the military returns them, and that is like the missing memory. And they kind of describe it as the military does something. Mulder undergoes this, which is why I bring it up, where the military can do something to delete memories from your brain. Is that how you kind of took that?
yeah, yeah, they do. Or didn't they have a scene where he was laying on his back and they were just, like sticking stuff in his
Yeah,
eye like,
very alien abduction esque. That's the kind of imagery that you associate with alien abduction kind of
but
stuff.
normal people or
Yeah,
normal doctors and stuff
right.
like that.
Yeah, because Colonel Budahas, there's that cool moment where his wife is like, and whoever the actress was that played the wife was great. She's like, "That's not my husband. That is not my husband," and she's like crying her eyes out. And he's repeating all of his stuff, like, "Hey, I'm 57 years old or whatever, and I was born here, and this is when the Cubs won the World Series or whatever." And then Mulder again, just cool as hell, that he's a one step ahead, asks this crazy, I guess, sort of like Air Force type
Very specific question about
question.
how many G's you pull in a certain turn.
Yeah,
Something
and he
that a test pilot would know.
yeah, and he can't remember any of it. And there's one of the cool things about these early episodes of the X Files. I mean, the acting in it is so good. It's just really, really good all around. Even from like the supporting guest stars and just kind of maybe throwaway characters like this Colonel Budahas guy. He's not in it very much. He's only in it a couple minutes, but man, he's so good in it though.
Mhm.
Loved it.
Yeah, nobody's really phoning it in. You could closely compare this to, like, this show would be like a Star Trek
Yep.
as far as the weirdo shows that appeal to people that were like that. And while Star Trek was good by and large, you'd always get the performances here and there where people just kind of wink, wink, nudge, nudge. I'm just here to have fun, and that was never like that with the X
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And eventually, we find out that there's a side character in this who's pretending he's a reporter, but turns out that he's one of the guys that's working at the military. There is this great sequence. I like that they did this, where they kind of turned Scully into a little bit of a badass without Mulder there, and I like that because I think it's important for at that time you didn't see a lot of female characters that were kind of like take charge and able to sort of handle themselves without a guy present. And we see this happen a couple times coming up in subsequent episodes. It happens again in Squeeze, where Scully actually puts up a fight, and she actually like does the smart thing. She notices that this reporter guy is not on the up and up, runs into the car, locks the doors, is trying to find like a gun, right? As this guy's breaking in, and she pulls a gun on him and gets him to basically get Mulder to free Mulder. She's the one that saves Mulder in this essentially, and I like that angle of it quite a bit because you didn't see that in the pilot episode, and they kind of really establish here like she can hold her own. She can hold her own.
What you'll notice in a lot of these, and something that I've been purposefully paying attention to, is when they're both together, watch who draws their weapon first. And it's not out of fear,
Oh,
it's
okay.
just that it almost is always Scully pulling her gun first. It's noticeable.
She almost kills Mulder and Squeeze in the parking
Yes.
lot. And I love. We'll get there. We'll get there. I won't spoil, but
Yeah,
I
I
love his
remember.
line. Go ahead. Sorry, did I cut you off?
Oh, no, no, no. We're gonna talk about it in Squeeze.
Yeah, it's so funny. So yeah, that's pretty much it. And at the very end of this episode, Scully, she's kind of saves Mulder, and she's kind of asked Mulder like, "What happened?" He's like, "I can't remember. Like, I can't remember." And then eventually, you get to the big sort of climactic scene with Mulder running around, doing the gut run around the I guess soccer field or whatever, and Deep Throat shows up, right? And Deep Throat's kind of like, he does this great, oh man, he has this great line here. I wrote it down here. So Mulder, I love how this ends because Mulder tells Deep Throat, he's like, I saw something, but it's gone. They took it from me, right? And this line get hits me in my childhood, and even it hits me now to this day, where Deep Throat asks Mulder, why do you think, like, why do you still believe in this stuff when there's so much evidence to show that none of it's true? He's trying to like sort of go at Mulder here a little bit just to try to pick his brain, like what that is. And Mulder says, quote, because all the evidence to the contrary is not entirely dissuasive, unquote. And I think that's a great line that Chris Carter wrote, because I think that sums up what people who sort of believe in this stuff and believe that, yeah, aliens have visited or are here or there are government conspiracies and stuff like that. That line sums up their belief system, doesn't it? Like, that's kind of like, hey, you can show me all the evidence, but it's not entirely dissuasive.
There's always that question. There's always that.
Yeah.
It sounds convincing, but still.
Yeah, for sure. And then I love that Mulder asks him, "We're like, they're here, aren't they?" And then Deep Throat just turns around. And he's like, "Mr. Mulder, they've been here a long, long time."
Oh yeah.
And you're just like, "Oh yes, all right, bring on the aliens. We want to see them. When are we gonna see the aliens?" And that's kind of like how I felt at the end of this episode. I'm like, it ends so good. I love Deep Throat. Jerry Hardin plays Deep Throat, and I think it's perfect. He's like an old grandpa, right? Just this kindly grandpa. He knows so much.
Unassuming. Yeah.
So, what are your overall thoughts on this episode?
I like this episode more than I like the previous episode just
Okay.
because of the subject matter and that sweet, like the triangle UFO that kind of zooms over the top of them on the runway,
Yeah.
flashes him with light, and then takes off. I thought all of that shit was so cool.
Yeah. What's really interesting, just some facts about this episode. This was inspired by the stories of the Aurora Project, which was a rumored secret military aircraft being designed by the U.S. at that time. So that's kind of where they got the inspiration from it. The exteriors of the Budahas house were reused. And that is the house that Frank Black lives in Millennium. So
Nice.
there's a deep cut for you. They reused that for Lance Henriksen's house in Millennium, which is a show I would like to revisit at some time because I remember liking it, but I don't remember a whole lot about it, honestly. So yeah, Seth Green, I noticed that he was pretty fun in this. Chris Carter did say that the flashing lights in the sky were, quote, the worst effects we've ever done, unquote. And I think when you watch them, they do look a little goofy. But I think they work. Like, I don't think it's that bad. I think he's a little harsh on the effects of it.
I The UFO
Yep.
of the runway was good when they were observing the lights earlier in the episode that were kind of swinging around. That was kind of hokey,
Yeah. So yeah, this was the first episode with Mark Snow composing the music and the title theme, and he didn't just do the title theme; he does all of the music going forward. And I think that one of the big sort of underrated aspects of this show is just the scores in general, because Mark Snow, whether it's Mulder and Scully walking into a creepy house. I remember Home. Do you remember that episode with the inbred cannibal
oh
people?
yeah.
Oh, we'll get to that.
uh,
That's great. But like, just the music in that, it's so distinctive. His music is so distinctive, and yet it's always different enough that it doesn't sound samey, if that makes sense. So I really love his stuff there. But yeah, I kind of echo you. I like this episode better than the pilot. I think this kind of takes what the pilot did and set up, and then it's like it ramps it up. So now we're going to 11 with this. Like, okay, there definitely are aliens now. We know for a fact there's aliens now. We know people know about the aliens, and we're gonna go on our way and figure it out. Any other final comments that you want to mention about this episode that we didn't cover?
Not they come to mind.
Okay, cool. Well, folks, that's it for episode 2, Deep Throat. Next week, we are going to talk about Squeeze, which I'll be interested to hear your thoughts on this one, Jeremy, because I distinctly remember as a kid being excited for aliens, but we veer off. We might not get aliens in this episode. We get something completely different. So stay tuned. Next Friday, hit that like and subscribe, whatever you want to do, and we'll be back talking about Squeeze.